So hello, this is David Raymond at the Virginia Cyber Range, and welcome to the weekly workshop. Today we will be continuing our series of discussions on CTF challenges, capture the flag challenges. So today we're going to talk about reverse engineering, and if you're not quite sure what that is, then we'll get to that in a few minutes. First, if you want to participate, then you can join our practice CTF. So go to https://factor.io/practice-CTF. And if you don't already have an account, you can click the register button in the upper right-hand corner and start solving CTF challenges right away. If you do have an account, then just log in. And if you forgot your password, there's a link there that you can use to get it reset. If you sorry, let's get this thing out. What's that? I hope so. Yeah. If you don't have a CTF environment to use, oops, sorry about that. If you don't have a CTF environment that you can use, I'm sorry, a Linux environment that you can use when you're solving challenges, then here's how you can get one. You just need a Cyber Basics environment. So if you have a Virginia Cyber Range educator account or a student account with a Cyber Basics environment, you can go ahead and use that, or you can use the invitation code that I've shown here. You just need to go to console.virginiacyberrange.net and at the login page and click the spot there where it says, do I have an invitation code? Click that, and then you can type in the invitation code. It's not case sensitive, and you'll be thrown into that environment. And it takes about 15 minutes to get your environment spun up. So if you're listening to this, excuse me, I got a bit of a scratch in my throat. If you're listening to this after the fact, then you can just pause for a few minutes, and while your environment gets set up and ready to go. So weekly workshops, coverage of cybersecurity topics each Tuesday at 1 p.m. They are recorded, of course, and shared at the virginiacyberrange.org webpage. So if you're watching this, you're probably watching it after the fact. That's how most of these get consumed. And if you have a particular topic you'd like to see, then please send us an email at contact@virginiacyberrange.org, and we will add it to the queue. So a couple of news stories to get us started off. I'll be brief on the news today. This is a recent news story in Bitcoin magazine. All right, so Bitcoin even has its own magazine now. It's probably had one for a while, just being facetious. So PayPal wins a patent for ransomware detection solution. And I think this is an interesting approach to ransomware. So, basically the approach to ransomware in the past has been, sort of the basic techniques that we use for network security, right? It's all about preventing malware from running on your system, and so to prevent ransomware or any other malware from running on our system, we do things like we use antivirus software. We might use firewalls to make sure that if the ransomware is able to get executed, then the callback to the command and control server doesn't work. We do user awareness training so that people don't fall for phishing campaigns. They don't click on the links or answer the request for their password or whatever. So there's kind of these standard techniques that we use to prevent malware infection, and those are the things that people in the past have really relied upon for ransomware as well. But this solution is a little bit different. It says their technique. So this is PayPal, who has submitted a patent for ransomware detection. The technique will distinguish between two pieces of content loaded in the cache of a computer system, comparing the two to determine if a version has been altered and encrypted. If that's found to be true, the version that is yet to be altered will be prevented from being deleted by the ransomware. So what ransomware does is it goes through your file system and it deletes files, or I'm sorry, it encrypts files. And so during the encryption process, both of the files have to exist, both the original file and the encrypted version of the file. And then when the encryption step is complete, then the ransomware will go back and delete the original file. So it can't, it's not going to sort of encrypt the file itself on the fly. It's got to create an encrypt, it goes through the file, creates an encrypted version of it. It's sort of like copying a file, but during the copy process, it's doing this encryption step. And then once that encryption step is complete, then it goes back and deletes the original. Okay, that's the standard process for encrypting files, whether you're doing it for ransomware or not. And so what this patent says is that, well, we're gonna keep track of the file system, and we're gonna watch to see if there's a copy of if there's two versions of the file and one of them is an encrypted version, and if that's the case, then we're going to prevent the malware from deleting the original version. And I don't know how effective this is. I mean, they're getting a patent for it, so I assume that they either have it working or they think that it'll work. And so this approach is different than sort of your traditional approach to preventing ransomware. It's actually a little bit more proactive, and I like it. I think it's interesting. I think it's good to find new ways to solve those kinds of problems. The other note here at the bottom, and again, this is in Bitcoin Magazine, RT, whoever that is, reported that due to this trend, and when they talk about this trend, they mean this ransomware trend. Companies have been silently piling up Bitcoin to ensure they can make these payments in the event of a ransomware attack, right? So companies, there's this question of if you get attacked with ransomware, if your files get encrypted, do you pay the hackers or not? And if you're in a business, then it just becomes a business decision. It's not, so like, the U.S. government, for example, has this sort of policy that says, oh, we don't negotiate with terrorists. So if a terrorist takes people hostage, we don't negotiate with them. We do other things to try to get the people back. And so, you get these kind of high-minded cybersecurity people who say, oh, you should never pay the ransom because you shouldn't negotiate with the terrorists. Well, the fact of the matter is, in a business, it becomes a business decision. It's not this high-minded philosophical decision. The decision should be, can I get my data back in a more cost-effective way than paying the ransom? And usually you can't, unless you have good backups and a very strong process for restoring your backups. Most organizations can't get their data back in a way that's more cost-effective than just paying the ransom. So a lot of them pay, not surprisingly. Okay, here's another news story. This has been in the news, at least in the InfoSec news over the last week or so. Well, maybe not a week, a few days, over the last few days. So Matthew Hitchens is a cybersecurity researcher, and he's been a cybersecurity researcher for the last, 3 or 4 years. Previous to that, however, he was, well, I guess previous to that, he was still a cybersecurity researcher, but he was sort of using his talents for evil instead of using them for good. And so he's Matthew Hitchens. He's pretty well known in the InfoSec community. He attends the big conferences. I met him last year at the Black Hat conference in Las Vegas. He really became famous for this thing that I'm circling here. He became famous about a year and a half ago because there was this software called WannaCry that people probably heard of. It was ransomware software, and it was written by the Russians, at least allegedly written by Russian state-sponsored, hackers, and they wrote this ransomware. And the first place it was used in the Ukraine, and it was used in coordination with some military intrusions into the Ukraine. And so, the thinking is that it was part of this military operation. Anyway, it's malware that was created in the Eastern Europe, and started spreading very wildly when it first came out, and it was encrypting a bunch of people's systems in Ukraine and other places. And so Matthew Hitchens, he was a security researcher, security professional. He got a copy of the malware, he reverse engineered it, and he discovered that there was a callback in the code that called back to a specific domain, internet domain, and that's not uncommon in malware. It generally, it does these callbacks to command and control servers, and asks for updates and whatever. And so one of the domains that this software was intended to call back to, he tried to go to the domain and it was not active, and he just looked up the registration information for the domain and it wasn't registered. So what he did is he registered it, and now he owned the command and control domain for this piece of malware, and he basically it turned into the kill switch. So he was able to shut down future WannaCry malware that was in the wild. And this was widely publicized. This sort of made him very well known, again, in the InfoSec community. And then, but it also sort of shined a spotlight on this guy, and the FBI quickly realized that he was a person who had been writing malware for money back in 2014, 2015. So this guy was, before he did this thing, he was sort of this cyber criminal. And he came to the United States for the Black Hat and DEF CON conferences in 2017. He lives in the United Kingdom. So he came to the United States in 2017 for these conferences, and the FBI arrested him as he tried to leave the country after those conferences. And so just this past week, he pleaded guilty to these crimes that he committed back in 2014, 2015. And there's this heated debate in the information security community. On the one side, people say, hey, this guy shouldn't be punished at all because he did this great thing, and he's being railroaded. And then there's this other side of the community that says, hey, this guy, we recognize the fact that he did this good thing, but still he committed crimes and he shouldn't be let off the hook. He's a criminal, right? And then, of course, there's a wide spectrum in between of, well, he did these things when he was younger, and he shouldn't be. Since then he's sort of reformed, and so now maybe he should be punished, but not as bad as he would have been if he didn't sort of change to the good side. So the reason I bring this up to this crowd, that was a very long introduction. I think this is a good case for you to talk to students about sort of the ethics behind all of this, right? So again, this is a bad guy turned good, essentially. He was a computer criminal, wrote malware, sold it to other people who used it, he wrote banking Trojans, right? So he wrote this software called the Kronos Banking Trojan, and what the software was designed to do was to capture people's credentials for their online banking, so that criminals could gain unauthorized access to your bank and steal your money. So it's clearly criminal intent. And then he sold it to other people. So there's no evidence that he actually used it himself, but he wrote it and sold it. And so here's a guy who did these sort of patently illegal things, a handful of years ago. Now he's turned around and he's doing things for good, or at least he did this one thing for good that we know of. And So what, so I put a couple of questions down here. To what level do good deeds negate past misdeeds? So it's if you put this in a non-infosec context, okay, a guy, robs grocery stores and then he stops some other guy from robbing a bank. Okay, so do we just say, well, those grocery stores you robbed, we're just going to lay you off the hook for that? And then there's this other group of infosec professionals who say, hey, if you're really going to be good at information security, you have to have been an evil hacker in your past. And personally, that is patently wrong, and that's exactly not what we want to teach our students. We want to teach our students that we're going to teach you how to do some offensive cybersecurity things in your cybersecurity class, and we're going to teach you those things for a couple of reasons. First of all, because there are people who get paid very well to be these things called penetration testers, right? So there are people who are paid to hack other people's systems with permission. That's a very important part of it. With permission and with certain boundaries drawn around that engagement. And we also teach people how to do some offensive things in order for them to understand how to do the defense. But never say that you have to be a criminal hacker in order to be a successful cybersecurity professional. I could list dozens and dozens of successful cybersecurity professionals who never did anything illegal from an infosec standpoint. So anyway, good discussion area, I think, for young students who are looking to go down this path, even older students. Okay, this week we're going to talk more about CTF challenges, so reverse engineering part 1. And next week we will talk about probably a little bit more reverse engineering. We're not going to go too deep into it because it's we're not going to go too deep into it. Okay, again, if you want to play along, here's the slide. So you should pause for a minute and get things set up, and then you can play some CTF challenges. And so I'm going to close this slide deck, and I'm going to pull up another one. I'm going to pull up Slack to snooze my notifications. And so I'm going to log into my CyberAge account and start up my virtual machine. So that's what you can do for the next few seconds while I'm throwing time. So what is reverse engineering all about? Reverse engineering is a process of oops, what did I do? Sorry, with Google. Got problems here. Wrong buttons. Try to talk. So arrangement of the workshops. Okay, this is slower right now. Okay, we'll let that start up. While that's starting up, I'm going to talk a little bit about reverse engineering. Okay, so what is reverse engineering? Well, so reverse engineering is taking executable programs and discovering how they work and what they do. And sometimes that's quite obvious. Oftentimes it's not obvious. And so who does this? Well, this is done by security professionals in order to discover how malware works, so malicious software. So there's lots of work in malicious software reverse engineering or malware reverse engineering. And the reason it's done is to protect systems from that malware or other similar malware. And so what does that mean? So I mentioned Matthew Hitchens in our news article who did this reverse engineering of the WannaCry malware, right? So what he did was he was able to get a copy of that malicious software that Trojan horse software, and he was able to discover how it functioned, and he was able to discover that it had this callback to this specific domain somewhere in the code, and then he was able to use that in order to essentially trigger a quick kill switch for the software, right? So he used reverse engineering to discover how the malware worked, and then he was able to essentially disable the malware for anybody in the future who got infected with that specific strain of the WannaCry malware. Now it's surely been modified since then so that people can now get affected again by the different modified version. But that very first, but the fact that he was able to sort of delay the impact made it possible for others to put other mitigations in place to prevent themselves from getting infected by this specific piece of malware, and so the overall effect of WannaCry was much less than it could have been. And that's what reverse engineers do, right? They analyze malicious software to figure out how it works, and these are people who work for companies like antivirus companies. So sometimes antivirus vendors want to understand how the malware works so that they can improve their ability to prevent you from getting infected. People who run companies, firewall that sell firewalls and intrusion detection systems are very interested in how malware works, because those different kinds of systems use the functioning of the particular strains of malware in order to identify those pieces of malware and prevent them from having a negative effect on your system. They're also used by companies that do things like blacklist particular domains, right? So if there are particular DNS domains that are associated with malware, then organizations basically blacklist those in their DNS records, so that if somebody foolishly clicks on the link and the malware is triggered, then when that malware tries to call back to some evil domain, that callback is blocked by the DNS name is not resolved, and so the malware can't call back to the malicious domain. So there's lots of good reasons for reverse engineering malware. It also teaches students about assembly language programming and computer organization and lots of other things that are interesting and useful if you're going to be a cybersecurity professional. I will say that these kinds of challenges are not entry level, right? So generally, reverse engineering challenges will be attacked by college students or security professionals who have who have had a background in things like assembly language programming and computer architecture, computer organization, operating systems, so they understand how the different components of the system work together. But you can surely get students looking at some very entry-level reverse engineering challenges, and it's helpful for them to think about, how programs might run, how they might function, and I think hopefully you'll get a sense of this as we look at some of the challenges that we're going to look at today. So that's kind of the high level of what reverse engineering is all about. Oops, my pen's not working again. Why does it do that? There we go. Okay, so what is reverse engineering? Well, we analyze or modifying. So for CTF challenges that are reverse engineering challenges, you're doing essentially the same thing. You're reverse engineering this piece of software, but what you're trying to get out of it is some flag that you can put into the CTF interface. So instead of finding the malicious domain, for example, you're trying to find a flag. So in a reverse engineering CTF challenge, we're going to analyze or modify an executable program to reveal the flag, right? It's all about revealing the flag. Generally, you're only provided with the binary application, no source code, right? If you have the source code, it would be super easy. So what you might have to try to do is turn that binary application, you might try to turn it all the way back into the source code. We'll talk about some ways that you might do that. But a lot of people don't try to turn it back into the source code. Instead, they can at least analyze the assembly language, right? So turning an executed program back into the original source code, and the source code could be written in the C programming language, or it could be Java, or it could be C++, or a variety of different programming languages. that's really hard to turn an executable program back into the source. What's not hard is turning an executable program back into the assembly language version of the program, because the assembly language is essentially encoded in the executable program. And so students who know assembly language can easily read a program that has been disassembled, and they can discover how it functions. But assembly language is a very low-level language, and it's not not necessarily easy to just sort of read it and analyze it. So people generally have to have a lot of experience or a lot of time on their hands. So it definitely helps to know assembly language. Definitely helps to know computer organization and architecture. And this is reverse engineering is a good way to learn both of these things, right? Because if you're going to be a successful reverse engineer, you have to understand a little bit of assembly language and a little bit of computer architecture. So some common tools that we use when we do reverse engineering. I've listed some tools here. We're actually not going to use any of these today, I don't think. We're going to use some other tools to analyze programs, but we'll try to get into some of these perhaps next week. Common tools are things like objdump. This is a Linux command line disassembler. So objdump will take your executable program and turn it into assembly language code that you can read. GDB, the GNU debugger. This is a Linux command line debugger. So you can use GDB to, so GDB is used when students are writing software and they're trying to debug their programs, trying to figure out what the errors are. You can also use this to analyze malicious software. So you can run your malware using GDB, and then you can step through the program and see what it does when it's actually running. So that's you use this for this thing called dynamic analysis. So you'll often do static analysis using tools like objdump. So you'll get the actual assembly code, and that can be helpful. And then also dynamic analysis can be helpful. There's a program called IDA Pro. This is commercial software used for disassembling and decompiling programs. And decompiling is that process of taking an executable program and turning it back into the original source code. So this, on the right side here, this is an image of this is an image of IDA Pro. So this is this software called IDA, and it's commercial software, costs about $3,000 for the basic version. If you want bells and whistles, you can pay $5,000 or $6,000 for it. So most CTF participants don't have a copy of IDA Pro handy. You can get free versions of IDA Pro. So the company that makes IDA Pro, it's a company called Hexrays. And it's a European company. They offer a couple of free versions, and actually the free versions are perfectly good for the kinds of reverse engineering that an entry-level reverse engineer is going to do. The paid version gives you a lot more bells and whistles, but there are a couple of free versions that you can download from the Hexrays website, and you can use that to do the kinds of things that we would do in a CTF. There's also new software. Oh, what the free version does not do is it does not do decompilation. So it's not going to turn your executable program back into the C code that it's based on, but it does do disassembly. So it'll turn your program into assembly language, and that's what this is. And it also will give you this graphical representation of the flow of the program. So this program, for example, it has this block where it starts, and then it looks like it goes into this other block, and then from that block, there's an if-then, so it might go straight to this block, or it might go down here, and then if it goes over here, then it's going to loop back up to here. So you can actually see, where the loops and the if-then statements go to different portions of the code, and so it's a lot easier to understand the assembly language if you can see this sort of control flow graph of the program. There's new software just released by the National Security Agency called Ghidra. And Ghidra is software that the NSA wrote for itself to do reverse engineering. So this is software that does disassembly and decompilation. It's something that was developed at the NSA. So apparently the NSA doesn't use IDAPRO. They use their own software that they wrote themselves. It's open source, so anybody can see the source code, and they've released the source code so anybody can download it and look at it. And it's very extensible, so you can write your own plugins to this Ghidra software to make it work with different programming languages, make it do different things. And this may really be a game changer in software reverse engineering. You know, IDAPRO used to be the thing. You know, the professionals used IDAPRO, and you had to be able to pay up in order to get the fully featured version of IDAPRO. And so, like, you know, I had a CTF team in New York, and we were able to fund one license of IDAPRO for the team. So basically, one person could use it. But now with Ghidra, it's you know, it's software that does essentially similar things, but it's free and it's open source. And so far, the feedback on it has been very good. It's been available for about a month now, and feedback has been good. So might be a game changer. Okay, so let me talk some about entry-level CTF, reverse engineering CTF challenges that your high school or college students who don't know anything about assembly language or any of that stuff. These are things that they can actually approach and you know, solve. And these are things that you'll see in CTFs. Again, you know, most of the ones we're going to talk about today are going to be relatively low point challenges. Not all of them. Some of them are a little bit higher on the point scale. But these are things that I think you'll see that your students, if they know a little bit about Linux and a little bit about maybe some programming or scripting, these are things that they'll be able to do. So entry-level challenges, here's the approach that I would recommend. First thing you want to do is run strings to see if the flag is obvious, right? So, and I recommend this for most challenge types that have a file associated with them. Run strings against it. If there's a particular flag format, so some CTFs have a format where it's like CTF and then the flag, or they'll have flag. And if you run strings and you see something like this, then boy, you got the answer, right? And so CTFs that have, you know, these entry-level reverse engineering challenges, they're going to include stuff like that because they want students to you know, they want to reinforce that to students that strings is a powerful tool and you can do all kinds of cool things with it, including maybe solve some entry-level reverse engineering challenges. Okay, so if you do strings and you look through the strings and you don't see anything interesting, next thing you want to do is you want to figure out what kind of a program it is so that you can run it on your system or not, right? You have to figure out where you can run this thing to get it to execute, because you know, for CTF challenges, you're almost always going to execute the program just to see what it does. So you run file against it, right? File, and this is the Linux command line, so file, and then the file name. We'll do this here in a minute. And you determine what type of executable it is. And here I list three different types, or the type of a file it is, right? So I list three different types here that are executable file types. One of them is ELF, executable in linkable format. So an ELF executable, that's a Linux program that you can run from a Linux system. Executable in linkable format, ELF. So some people refer to ELF as executable Linux format. It's actually not, the L doesn't stand for Linux, but it might as well, because that's the context in which these things can be executed. When you run file, it might tell you that it's a PE file. Portable executable, that's a Windows program, so that's something that'll run on Windows. So, so sometimes you'll get a reverse engineering program, you know, challenge that you can't run in Linux. You got to run it on your Windows system, and so you know that's sometimes students get to a CTF and they have their Windows machine, but they have a Linux virtual machine running on it, and now they get this program that they're downloading off the CTF site, and they're a little bit concerned that they are now going to have to run this thing on their Windows laptop, which, you know, who knows what the file is. So I encourage when students go to, like live CTF competitions, I always encourage them to have, for at least one person on their team to have a Windows virtual machine that they can use to just in case you get one of these kinds of Windows challenges. And then sometimes you'll see an AIF file type, AIF, ARM image format. So this is, ARM is for embedded systems. It's executable programs that run in embedded code. So it runs on microprocessors that are like in your car or in IoT devices and stuff like that. So there's lots of embedded systems that aren't beefy enough to run a Linux executable, but they can run these ARM image format executables. Most of what you're going to see in CTFs nowadays are going to be ELFs. Sometimes you'll see a PE. You may see more and more ARM image format files these days because embedded programming is becoming more, with IoT, there's been a little bit more of a focus on it. Okay, so you figure out what kind of a file it is, and if it's a Linux executable, Linux, then you want to chmod it to make it executable. So it's almost always not going to be executable when you pull it off the CTF site because it's going to lose the file permissions when it's downloaded from the website. Is generally not going to have the executable flag set. So you got to make it executable, and the way you do that is you use chmod, and you use the +X command line switch. So that makes it executable. So to make a file readable, you can do a +R. To make it writable, you can do a +W. To make it executable, you do a +X. And that's one way of using chmod to make your program executable. And then you put the file name. And again, this is a Linux command. And then you run the program to see what it does. Do some analysis, see if you can beat it without diving in too deeply, right? So some of these, some of your analysis or some of your reverse engineering is simply going to be running the program and analyzing the inputs and seeing what the inputs do, and see if you can fuzz the program. So the next line here, there's this technique called fuzzing. And what fuzzing is you sort of throw a bunch of garbage into the input, into the spots in the program where you can give it input. And you try to make it misbehave, and it might crash. And then you see, oh, it crashes when I push in 1,000 characters. So, maybe I can do a buffer overflow. And next time we'll talk about buffer overflows. In fact, we'll do a hands-on buffer overflow. But these are the things, So again, you may never have to dive deeply into the assembly language programming, and we're not going to do that at all today. We're simply going to use some of these techniques to analyze what the program does and see if we can figure out a way to sort of beat the program to get it to do what we want it to do. Okay, so I'm going to stop on that slide. And I'm going to jump into my environment here. So here I'm in my Cyber Basics environment. This thing's still running. Log in. Student. Yeah. Browser. CTF. And challenges. Oh, let's go to log in. Okay, so here we go. Threw in a bunch of reverse engineering challenges. Most of these are not here. If you looked at this earlier this morning. Okay, so let's look at the first one. It's worth 5 points. So remember, low point value challenges are the easiest of the challenges. So let's start with this one. We're going to choose to save the file. We're not going to open it with our browser. That's not going to help. Or I'm not going to try to open it. So I'm just going to save it. Okay, so now the file has been downloaded. Okay, so now if I want to look at it, my terminal window here. A little bit bigger so people can see it. Lost the And where's it at? Well, it's in my downloads folder, right? Okay, there's a bunch of junk in there from previous CTF challenge solving. So I'm going to say make dir CTF. I'm going to say move star CTF. Okay. There we go. I got rid of the wrong crud. And then I want to move CTF strings back to this directory. Okay, this is a lot clearer. Okay, so here's my downloads folder, and I have a folder called CTF. That's where I dumped all the other stuff from previous CTF challenges. But what I have in here is a program called strings, and I just downloaded it off the CTF site, and so permissions are not set to make it an executable program. I could run file against it, file strings, and you see here the name of the program is strings. It's an ELF 32-bit executable designed to run on Intel 8386, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Linked. Here's the link, the dynamic link libraries. It's pointing towards GNU Linux 2.6.24, not stripped. And maybe we'll talk about stripped binaries next time, but we won't talk about that today. It's not stripped. It's good news. Okay, so in my previous slide, I said the first thing you want to do is run strings against it, right? So if I run strings against a program called strings, I'm not running strings against the Linux. I'm not running it against the Linux utility strings. I'm running strings against that program called strings that's in my downloads folder. And so if you look through this, what you'll see, and you don't have to look very far to see, flag, and then it's got seriously written in whatever, lead speak hacker alphabet. So you have the 1 instead of the L, $, instead of the S, but seriously and then a question mark. Okay, so super low point challenge. And so we'll see if that's the flag. Paste. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we already solved our first reverse engineering challenge. So that was super easy, right? But it teaches students who don't know it what the strings program does. Okay, the next one is called Linux. It says run me in Linux. Okay. Let's save it. Okay, let's go over here. So another low point challenge worth 10 points. I can run strings against it. And oh, that's right. There's the answer right there. Wow, it's easier than it should have been. Really, the point of this program is to teach folks how to make a program executable and run it on a Linux command line. If I tried to run this right now, the name of it is Linux. It won't run, right? It says permission denied. Why is permission denied? Well, it's permission denied because it's not executable, right? So in order for it to be executable, you have to have the executable flag set. And the way to do that is I say chmod +x Linux. So I'm basically changing the mode of the program, adding the executable flag to it. Now if I do an ls-al, now it's executable. So now I can say .Linux, and C command line isn't that hard. Welcome to Linux. Again, this is 10 points, super low point challenge, but the whole point is to introduce some of these basic concepts like making a program. How do I make a program executable so that it can be run in the command line? What does this one do? I don't even know what this one does. Bard, it says file, and let's see what the file is. It's called datafile.txt. Okay. So datafile.txt, that's not an executable program. Let's cat it. Oh, it doesn't look like a text file, does it? What does that look like? So what do I do? Run file against it. Oh, look, it's 32-bit LS, 32-bit ELF executable. Okay, so the point in this one, I think, is just that it has a .text file extension, but the .text is meaningless, right? This thing is not a text file; it's an executable file, you know. So how do I, you know, so I could run strings on it. And a bunch of stuff in here. Nothing looks like a flag. So if I say chmod plus x data file.txt, and I run it. What's in a name, right? What's in a name? Okay, so that I think is the flag. Copy. Let's paste. Okay, and this one called crackme. That's, you know, another low point challenge that we want to take a look at and figure out how to solve it really quickly. Let's take a look at this one called game. This is called game. Okay, I'm going to save it. So same process, right? Now we have this thing called game. It's not executable, so let's do strings. Okay, run strings and see if there's any thing that looks like it's a flag. There's a bunch. Oh, okay, here's an alphabet. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, it's got some. Okay, so I don't see anything that necessarily looks like a flag, but here's some messaging, right? So I'm going to run this program in a minute, but access denied, access granted, output message, beat the house and win. Can you get to $1 million without going bust? You begin with 1K. Your pod is this, enter an integer, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so this is actually something that, you know, it's a program that looks like it does something. I don't see a flag anywhere in here that's obvious. So let's chmod plus x game run game. Beat the house and win. Can you get to $1 million without going bust? You begin with $1,000. Your pot is 1,000. Enter integer bet 500. House rolls 8. You roll 9. Okay, so it looks like some kind of a dice thing. Looks pretty random though. I mean, it seems to be using random numbers, right? So I bet at a start of 1,000, I bet 500. The house rolls 8. You roll 9, so I beat the house and I win. So now I have 1,500. Okay, here your bet. 500. Okay, same thing happened again. House rolls 8. You roll 6. Bad luck, you lose. Plus 5. Okay, lost again. Okay, we both roll 6. Oh, okay, now I ran out of money, so I'm broke. So let's try this again. Okay, and this time I lost on the first try. Last time I won on the first try, this time I lost on the first try. So this is not bode well. Oh, lost right away. Let's go big. Oh, I won. Oh, I lost. Okay. So I'm playing the game according to what seems to be the rules, and I could probably, you know, if I did it enough times, you know, it's random, right? So I have essentially 50-50 chance each time at each turn to win or lose. Well, what happens if I try to bet more money than I have? Oh, can't bet more in your pot. Can't put more in your pot. Okay, well, so I can't bet more than I have. So maybe we do a little fuzz action, a little fuzzing. Ooh. I don't know what I did there, but it kind of goes crazy when I put in random stuff. Let's go for a minute too, but this doesn't seem to be getting me very far. So you see that if I put in bogus input, in this case I put in a bunch of random text, this thing completely misbehaves, right? So I don't know that it'll ever do anything productive because it keeps basically at $1,000, right? What else can we try? What if I put in 0? Okay, I lost, but I didn't lose anything. What if I put in -1? Oh, okay. I put in -1. Here's your bet, -1. I put in -1. And bad luck, you lose, but my pot is now 1,001. Okay, so what did I just discover here? Well, what I discovered was that I don't have to make a bet, so I can enter 0. That's useful, I suppose. This is also very interesting. So I bet a -1. It let me bet a negative number, and so what is that? What can I do with that? I bet -1,000. Oh, I won, and basically it added -1,000 now to $1. Or if I put minus 10 million. This was 3 or 5 UN, you're broke. Okay, so that's okay. So I won, but it added -10 million. I think if I have enough, if I bet enough in a negative way and I lose, I win. Here I won, so I lost. I keep winning, and then I lose. Measure bet minus broke. Let's go ahead and hack this thing. It's not giving me measure those too big. It's overflowing. Oops. Oh, house rolls 8, you roll 7. Bad luck, you lose. You won. Segmentation fault. Yeah, so something's not working right here. What should happen is when I make a negative bet, I should get the flag spit out. So this is not behaving the way it should. But oh, so what I could do now, if I was an advanced reverse engineer, is I could get the seg fault. I could analyze that segmentation fault file. So it dumps the core. I'm not going to go through all that, but so we see that with this program, it didn't quite get to where I wanted to get to, but I basically put in bogus inputs, and I realized that I can get it to misbehave, and unfortunately, it didn't quite misbehave in the right way, so I have to hack on that a little bit. I'm not going to solve that one right now. Maybe I'll come back to it next week. Here's another one. Elfish is what it's called, right? So let's save it. Elfish, it's called Elfish. Okay, so strings, Elfish. There it is. So, you know, it looks obviously like a flag. Wow. Oh, it's data. Elfish is data. Cat it. Cat it. It's data file, so let's do chmod plus x. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, so so when I cat this, it looks like it's a C program because it's got things like libc and it's got like the glibc. You know, it's looking for C libraries. But the thing that you'll notice about this is that so here I'll run a tool called bless. Again, remember we installed bless back when we were doing file carving in the networking challenges. So I run bless against Elfish, and here's the beginning of that program. So we have a .lol, and so that looks kind of suspicious, right? So let's run bless Elfish background. Okay, it's got this funny looking LOL. So something's wrong with this executable, right? So it is looks like a malformed executable because it's got the stuff in it that makes it look like it's a C program that's trying to, you know, look up shared libraries, but it doesn't execute. So let's see what a program, and just by way of foreshadowing, remember we talked back during the networking challenges about magic numbers, right? So magic numbers, there are bytes at the beginning of a file that tell the file system and tell the operating system what kind of a file it is. And so let's look at a executable that actually works properly. So we'll say bless, and we'll do game, right? Okay. So here's what we should see at the beginning of an ELF executable. And if I were to do some quick Googling for ELF executable file format, there's this ELF header at the beginning. And, whoops, I got a bunch of images. It's got an ELF header at the beginning. And if I were to dig into Wikipedia, I don't know if Wikipedia is a good source for this, but you know, it's basically going to tell me that the first series of characters should be 0x7f followed by ELF 45 4C 46, and that's what I get here, right? 7F, then 45 4C 46. So it should say ELF. Here it has the 7F, but then it's got this LOL, right? So somebody's basically, what it means is somebody's mucked with the magic number of this program, and so the Linux system doesn't understand what kind of a program it's supposed to be, and so it doesn't function properly. So how do we fix it? Well, what I can do here is I can copy, then I can paste And then I can say file, save. And then I will run file against it. Okay, now I've fixed it, so now the system knows that it's a 32-bit Linux executable program. So now I'm going to run it. And it spits out. Here's the flag. Okay, so that's a little study of magic numbers and a little bit. We'll look at maybe doing some simple scripting in order to get the programs to behave in a certain way, and maybe we'll get to the point where we're doing a little bit of assembly language analysis, just so you get a sense of what it's all about. Maybe you can use it someday. All right, so thanks for participating today, and we'll see you on the next workshop.